My name is Melanie Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking to you about first-generation Americans and also how they were portrayed in the Book of the Unknown Americans, and kind of the parallels of the realities that people face here in America when they immigrate from a different country and how it was represented in the book. So first off, to define first-generation Americans, some people have scholars debated exactly what it means. Some people debate whether it's someone who has originally immigrated or it's the children of immigrants. But all of them seem to agree that it is someone whose parents, or at least one of them, is a foreigner. So that is the definition I'm going to be using for my presentation. And most people don't know this, but actually the generations that are having our kids right now, the kids right now are about 25.4% are from immigrants, either first or second generation. And before, it had been predominantly coming from Mexico, where most of our immigration populations, but in recent years, it has been shown to be coming more from El Salvador, India, and the Philippines. So one of the very first challenges that immigrants come across as soon as they get here to America is the obvious language problem. And so it's already an immediate barrier that as soon as they reach here, they try to communicate. And if they didn't have previous experience in English, which is most of the cases, then they already are having difficulty trying to just settle in. And because they come from a different country, they have a different language. So they have to relearn a whole entire new language. So in chapter 7 of the book, we see that English was such a dense, tight language. So many hard letters, like miniature walls, not open with vowels, the way Spanish was. Our throats open, our mouths open, our hearts open. In English, the sounds were closed. They thudded to the floor. So you can see already how whenever our main character is moving into America, how they feel already the seclusion even in the very language, but while they feel like in their own language, which is Spanish, that they're very open and able to express themselves easier. The next problem that they face is financial disadvantages. Because they are, many of them, starting from scratch in a whole different country, they do sometimes, their children often even if expected to be in a different level of economic status than most non-immigrant children. They tend to fall below the low poverty threshold, and their parents oftentimes come from low education or rarely any college degrees, and if they're lucky, high school diplomas. And if these situations weren't difficult enough, they do sometimes only have not fewer siblings, but they usually have 3 or more siblings. So in chapter 4 of our book, we see that the hot dog will be ready soon, I added, as if it were some sort of consolation. But when Arthur didn't say anything, I felt acutely the meaningless of it all, the insufficiency. We wanted more. We wanted what we had come here for. So a lot of times immigrants believe that in America there's so much plentiful that it's basically a safe haven, heaven on earth. And when they get here and it's difficult for them to get a job, and if they do get a job, it's not well paying and the conditions aren't that great, then they start discovering that it's a bit of still of a struggle here, even for Americans. So another important issue that comes up is also the fear of being undocumented, because a lot of times the process, many people, if you haven't gone through it, you don't know much about it. But whenever you come here, a lot of times if you do come legally, which is the majority of the cases, a lot of times you end up not being able to stay. Excuse me. So one of the issues is that whenever you come, there's so many rules that are so nitpicky that if you make one small mistake, it could really just end your life here in America. So, and a lot of times if that is their situation, they can't do the basic things they need to do in living with their undocumented, which is about 11 million undocumented immigrants in America. And so this leads to difficulties because many people don't know this, but actually if you are undocumented, you have no social security. And if you want to have a driver's license, you must have a social security. So undocumented immigrants are unable to drive, so they can't take their kids to work or kids to school. They can't go to work, go to the grocery store, go to church. those kinds of things. And if they do, they're at risk for, if they have a broken tail light or something and a police officer stops them, they could be deported right then and there for something so simple. And so, excuse me, the next quote is from a man who actually, he's a husband now with his own wife and children, but Ed was deported to Honduras as a 17-year-old after he was convicted of shoplifting a t-shirt from a shopping mall years before she had even met him. He paid for a coyote, which is someone who sneaks people across the border, to bring him back to the U.S. after deciding Honduras wasn't safe for him. Because of his deportation, their marriage alone doesn't qualify him for citizenship. So, a silly mistake he made as a teenager, 17, still a minor, of stealing a t-shirt, or attempting to, and something that many people probably would have gotten off with a warning or probably not even much legal persecution, wound up getting him deported, and now he had to come back and is living illegally and just trying to work and support a family. And so excuse me. So, a quote from the book again is in chapter 19. It was that this wasn't how it was supposed to happen. We had followed the rules. We had said to ourselves, we won't be like the people who pack up and go north without waiting for the proper authorization. We were no less desperate than everyone else. We understand, just as they did, how badly a person could want a thing, money or peace of mind or better education for their injured daughter or just a chance at this thing called life. But we worked different. We would do it the right way. So we filled out our papers and waited nearly a year before they let us come. We waited, even though it would have been so much easier not to wait. And for what? So again, in the book, the father gets documentations, but he's required to still have a job in order to keep those documentations. And so, like, when he loses his job, it puts the family in risk, and all that waiting really, it feels like it's going to waste, because if they could have come illegally, and which would have been easier, but it's going all to waste due to the fact of small details that he really has no control over, being laid off of work. And so so these issues with the government, of American governments, and just, ICE and so on, leads on excuse me to be having a general distrust to all government officials. And due to that, many times when there is abuse in any situation, they're too scared to come up to it. So recent years, especially in 2018, they've gotten much harsher on the policies on illegal immigrants. And so because of that, reports of abuse have fallen drastically. So in Houston alone, over the last year, 40% of Latinos have stopped reporting abuse. And in LA, domestic violence went down 10%, and 25% of sexual assaults decreased. And that was over a year. So that shows just how much distrust and just fear to go into the government and report issues that had happened in their lives. In chapter 28, previously one of the characters had been assaulted, but they mention and say it was only a word, justice. It was only a concept, and it wasn't enough. So they had gone to the police. They were one of the few that do report, and they just kind of couldn't. They really said, we can't do anything about this in this situation. So, and on top of all of this, the children of immigrants, a lot of times they go through the pressure of the American dream. When their parents first come here, they sacrifice their whole lives and they change everything in order for their children to have a better future. And so with that pressure, a lot of times the parents, they feel that pressure their parents put on them, and so they want their kids to go to get an education and get a very lucrative job, or become a doctor, become a lawyer, and that kind of stuff. And a lot of times that can cause like a lot of inner turmoil, because if a student or a student who's an immigrant, they want to become an artist, then the parents may end up going, it's like, I sacrificed all this and I worked late nights and 2 jobs and so on for you to be an artist, and throw it all away. So a lot of times they can end up going into whatever their parents want them to do. And honestly, a child can't really argue. They see the sacrifice their parents did their entire life, and in the end they end up sacrificing their own dreams, in a sense. So in chapter 28, it goes on that maybe it's the instinct of every immigrant, born of necessity, of longing Someplace else will be better than here, in this condition, if only I can get to that place. So, the parents of, excuse me, underprivileged immigrants, excuse me, they, I'm sorry, I'm sick. They aren't able to go and become a doctor. They come here as 40, 50-year-olds, and they can't go and go pursue a degree, and when they have to go work 2-3 jobs to support their children. So whenever they try to push on their dreams or their hopes, and they mean well, but they may end up hurting the child more than they mean to. And so, all of these different things lead to a conflicts of just having many different internal conflicts in self. So a lot of times the students or the children of immigrants will then begin having troubles identifying who they are and where their roots are, and just kind of having this new experience because their parents are from a different country and now they're in this country, or vice versa. And so they're like really torn between two worlds, especially when like the government of the land they live in is persecuting them with maybe even, and possibly their neighbors with racial tension, and then their parents with their culture and their language are their home as well. And so a journalist was reporting, and she said that her fiance was also a, a son of immigrants, and said, when I'm in a situation, excuse me, when I'm in a situation where I'm required to speak Spanish and become visibly flushed, he understands that years of insecurity and culture suppression bubbling to the surface. And it just, excuse me, it just goes on to show that people, it's something that they don't even really pick up, and it's just like until it's pointed out, or in certain situations they don't realize just how different they are to everyone else, and not being able to fully identify as Mexican or fully identify as American, because when they, for example, go back to Mexico to visit family, they seem too American for their Mexican family, or when they go hang out with their American friends, they're too Mexican for them. And so it makes this like tension of trying to figure out whether or not which side you really are. So in this quote, one of the characters is talking and says that, "It's in you, my dad answered me once. You were born in Panama. It is in your bones. I spent a lot of time trying to find it in me, but usually I couldn't. I felt more American than anything, but even that was up for debate, according to the kids at school who taunted me over the years. The truth was that I didn't know which I was. I wasn't allowed to claim the thing I felt, and I didn't feel the thing I was supposed to claim." So you see just how much turmoil that can come, not to mention not just inside, but all from outside forces of your parents and your school and your neighbors and so on. So all of these excuse me, come together, and it becomes a really big issue for basically trying to figure out who you are in this world. And I would like to leave with one final quote. So in chapter 24, it goes, "We're the unknown Americans, the ones no one ever wants to know, because they've been told they're supposed to be scared of us. Because maybe if they didn't take the time to get to know us, they might realize that we're not that bad. Maybe even that we're a lot like them. And who would they hate then?" Thank you.